In 1966, then president of CBS, Fred Silverman, commissioned Hanna-Barbera to produce a superhero series that would also play into the rising interests of aliens and space exploration. It would prove to be a challenge for Bill and Joe, as they were mostly experienced in short-formed animal comedy cartoons at the time. But they, along with legendary artist Alex Toth, got their combined geniuses together to create the series Space Ghost and Dino Boy. While the show only lasted one season, it proved to be so popular that it kicked off a craze of action-based cartoons for years to come and expanded Hanna-Barbera's horizons to go beyond funny animal cartoons. Flash forward to 1993. The infant cable channel known as Cartoon Network was wanting to dip its toes into original programming with adults in mind. A team of network employees, Mike Lazo, Andy Merrill, and Jay Edwards, put together a pilot using recycled footage of the old Space Ghost episodes to create a surreal talk show parody. This led to Space Ghost Coast to Coast debut in April 15th, 1994, late night on Cartoon Network. Like the wave of action cartoons that spawned from Space Ghost's popularity back in the 60s, the impact of this wacky, low-budget series changed the network, and arguably animation, forever. Growing up watching Cartoon Network, it was the kind of channel I could leave on and be entertained by everything that was being shown. Granted, I was young and easy to impress, but some of my earliest childhood memories were watching Rocky and Bullwinkle on the network at a time I should have been asleep, but then it was quickly followed by Space Ghost Coast to Coast. It wasn't like anything I had seen up to that point. Whoa, how'd they get real people into this cartoon? Why aren't the characters moving around too much? How has my mom not caught me staying up this late? None of this mattered, as this show captivated me at my young age. Sure, I was way too little to know who all these celebrities were and the kind of stoner humor this show was going for, but there was always something that kept me coming back. When the show had juvenile situations that my young dumb self could tickle, but my old dumb self still finds funny.
What in the name of Jumanji is going on here? Who's this?
Well, I'm Space Ghost, baby.
Space Ghost, baby. I'm Space Ghost.
I am.
I am.
Me.
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 Let's take a moment to talk about the theme song. This is a tune that's been chiseled into my head at an early age. I still remember taking a nap at my daycare, and this song was there in my head playing me to sleep. It's one of the most underrated theme songs in all of television, and I don't think people talk about it enough. Of course, going back to the series as an adult, it fascinates me just how many celebrities they were able to sucker into being interviewed. Adam West, Weird Al Yankovic, the frickin' Ramones, David Byrne, Matt Groening, George Clinton, Mike Judge, Buzz Aldrin, Willie Nelson, and even creators of Cartoon Network shows like Craig McCracken and Gendy Tartakovsky. And that's just a sampling. Space Ghost rarely brought these people on to promote their work or sing their praises. He mostly just liked to mess with them.
You were on that island for 15 years. How did you recharge the batteries for that radio?
It was a TV show.
And as an adult, do you think I understand the humor better? Well, kinda. This show was an early example of troll humor. The kind of comedy that the writers don't care if they're the only ones they find funny. They are going to do it anyway. And usually in comedy, that's the way to go. If you make yourself laugh, chances are there's people out there that will laugh along with you. A perfect example I can think of is from the episode Fire Ant, where Space Ghost literally ditches his show to go follow a fire ant. This goes on for 10 minutes! And this is a cartoon that's a treasure trove of out-of-context clips.
The blob! I thought I told... You better run, Joey. Yep.
The overall plots of the show, there were no plots. They were just excuses for the writers to mess around and do funny jokes. Sure, there was sometimes a semblance of a story, but mostly, they served as mainly backdrops to tell jokes, mostly at the guests' and especially Zorak's expense. The dude was always getting blasted by the ghost. Replacing legendary voice actor Gary Owens as Space Ghost was none other than radio and TBS regular George Lowe, who always portrayed Space Ghost in a confident buffoonery that was both charming as well as admirable. He could make you believe that this oafish guy really was a hero. The late, great C. Markin Croker not only provided the voices of Space Ghost sidekicks Zorak and Moltar, but was also the lead animator for the series. Zorak is pretty much the Ed McMahon of the show, only he tends to argue and be antagonistic with Space Ghost. I'd say he was my favorite character of the show because I love how he just didn't want to put up with anybody's crap. Moltar is the bossy director who's always trying to keep things in line, but finds himself falling into the madness of his co-stars' antics frequently. Finally, rounding up the main cast was the aforementioned Andy Merrill as Brack. The role that would define the man's career. Brack is everyone's favorite man-child space pirate, who I'm sure it's a crime to hate. The series featured various other appearances from past Space Ghost characters, such as Tanzit, Lokar, as well as Harvey Birdman, who would go on to get his own spin-off series years later. Space Ghost was never a critical hit, something that the creators poked fun at on the Volume 2 DVD, including quotes from negative reviews. My favorite being from Rick Bentley writing for Californian. If this is the most creative show the Cartoon Network has to offer, the future looks very bleak. Dang. Somebody should ask that guy for lottery numbers. But the series was obviously a hit, gaining a strong cult following and being the catalyst for Cartoon Network creating its iconic little brother, Adult Swim. Space Ghost Coast to Coast was even revived as a gateway to begin the block, after being briefly ended in 1999, running for a total of 9 seasons on the network, but being revived again 2 years later on GameTap. Remember GameTap? I remember advertisements on G4. Space Ghost Legacy was felt throughout all of Adult Swim, as several of the show's writers went on to work on a lot of the block's most well-known shows. 2 of the main writers even created the channel's archetypal series. You might have heard of it. I'll take this time to talk about George Lowe. After Space Ghost, he found himself being a regular on other Adult Swim programs, with plenty of cameos in Aqua Teen Hunger Force and Robot Chicken.
They couldn't afford LaFontaine. Yeah, Mr. $30,000 a minute.
Oh, wait, Mr. Big Shot.
In the magical land of unicorns, there's no need for clothing.
Whatever you say.
No. Take it off slowly.
He would also reprise his role as Space Ghost in plenty of later appearances, with the last being Jellystone. From being a little-known TV and radio announcer to lending his voice to an iconic cartoon character, you can tell he had fun playing the role, and that he didn't mind it being what he was known for. He embraced it. Sadly, nobody lasts forever, as George Lowe passed away at his house in Florida on March 2nd of this year due to complications from heart surgery. The outpouring of support I saw from his fans and friends was heartwarming to see. His voice and the character he helped bring to our homes reached a whole legion of people who took time to thank the man for all the laughs and good times he helped give us. They always say nobody is ever really dead so long as you remember them, and I believe George is going to live on for years to come thanks to all the hearts he touched throughout the years. Years later, Space Ghost Coast to Coast still holds up as a series that showed you don't need a big budget or even elaborate animation to make an engaging series. You can do plenty with unconventionally humorous writing and eccentrically relatable characters. Space Ghost's influence can even be felt in the talk show genre, as the Eric Andre show feels like the spiritual successor to Space Ghost, taking the surreal comedy and prank-style interviews to new heights. Space Ghost Coast to Coast stands tall as the grandfather of all Cartoon Network and Adult Swim shows that came after it. What about the Moxie Show? Yeah, what about the Moxie Show? Space Ghost serves as an early example of the random, nonsensical humor that defined the millennial generation. When we eventually have space colonies of our own, we'll still be watching Space Ghost. While talk show hosts like Johnny Carson, Arsenio Hall, David Letterman, and Conan O'Brien were kings of late night in their own rights, for me, the real king of late night talk shows will always be Tad Ghostal. See Looney Tunes The Day the Earth Blew Up, only in theaters, March 14th.